then when I went to the devotees for the Sunday feast, first question I asked was, what's your process? They said, chant, dance, and eat. Okay. I said, okay, I try that. And I said, so if I chant, dance, and eat, what can I expect to happen? So they told me, you will see God. I said, yes, I don't want to be God. I want to see God. I want to see God. So yes, so after I was going to the temple, but I wasn't ready to surrender everything and join because my husband wasn't so interested. But then one weekend, the devotees said, Srila Prabhupada is coming. You should come and stay for the weekend. So I said, okay. I went there, and interesting thing happened. Prabhupada did not come. He phoned and said he wasn't able to come, but he sent 4 sannyasis instead. And one of those sannyasis was Vishnujan Maharaj, Kirtaniya. Day and night, we were out on the streets chanting. And after that weekend, I was so happy. I said, why should I go back home? And not only myself, but 4 or 5 other people never went back home that weekend. I went back, said goodbye to my husband, and joined the temple. And my husband joined 2 months later because his philosophy, he was a hippie, his philosophy was, I won't work. Now, I was working a little bit, so he had some money, but he could not follow his philosophy, so he had to become a devotee because we didn't work. We all were out in the streets singing and dancing the whole day. And he also became a devotee after 2 months. He liked the philosophy also very much. So, yes, so what we were doing, we were on the streets 10 hours a day chanting and dancing, singing Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And it was quite an amazing temple in Boston in 1970. Our temple president was Srila Prabhupada, who was Grihastha, Satsrup Maharaj. Our Harinam Sankirtan leader was Giriraj Maharaj. Temple commander was Sri Dayananda Maharaj. And head of the press was Jayadvaita Maharaj. And Pradyumna was there, and all the artists were there, and we were having dramas every week. And wonderful kirtaniyas, Bhardaraj, different kirtaniyas were there. So it was very easy to join that temple. And so we were out on Harinam day and night, and we would, even till midnight, we didn't go to Mangalarti in those days. After the first 2 months, then they started Mangalarti because the Pujari complained to Prabhupada, nobody's coming to Mangalarti. So then Prabhupada made it a rule, everyone has to go to Mangalarti. So we were sleeping at 10 at night and we were coming home from Harinam. So it was not easy. But we did, we were happy. We were so happy just doing Harinam all day and night. We were very happy. We were so happy. We didn't feel like we were in our bodies. We were separated. Somebody asked me one day, they said, because I had maybe a cold, or they said, are you okay? You look a little sick. I said, well, I'm not sure. Maybe I have a fever, or maybe it's ecstatic symptoms. I don't know. That's how we were. We didn't know. We weren't part of this material world. We were way out there. If you do Harinam 10 hours a day, then it'll do it to you. It was wonderful though, wonderful. And we were young, we could, now I'm too old. But in those days we could do it. We were dancing 10 hours a day. And so then after 6 months, what happens after 6 months is after you join the temple, you get initiated by Prabhupada after 6 months. So I went to my temple president and asked him, can I get initiated? And he said, well, wait for your husband 2 more months. I said, okay. After 2 months, I asked my husband, so let's get initiated. And my husband says, I'm not ready. I said, well, I'm not going to wait any longer for you. And I wrote a letter to Prabhupada, sent my beads, and he told me, first birth is, and I sent a letter. We had Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd canto, 3rd chapter, and there's a verse that says, if you don't get the dust of the lotus feet of a pure devotee, then you're a dead man. I said, Prabhupada, if you don't initiate me, I quoted that verse, and I said, I'll be a dead person. So please initiate me. And he sent me a letter, and he said, first birth is from your mother and father, but second birth, real birth, is from the spiritual master. He gave me 6 instructions in my letter. So far I've been following 5 of those instructions. Chant at least 16 rounds, follow the regulative principles, read and study all my books, do deity worship, and go on sing kirtan. Those are the 5. First 7 years, I was doing deity worship in Calcutta. I came to India in 72. And then after that, 7 years, I was doing book distribution, traveling Maharashtra, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Bombay for Juhu Temple. And then since 1994, I'm studying and teaching the books. So, but one instruction I still have to do, and that one is 24 hours be engaged in Krishna's service. So maybe someday I'll do bhajan, and I'll be 24 hours engaged. Now I'm not so. There's some gaps there, some gaps. But anyway, after 6 months in Boston, our temple president said, I'm sending you to Florida, because Brahmananda was starting a temple, Gargamuni, and so we were sent to Tallahassee. How did he send us? Not by plane, and not by train, and not by bus. Hitchhike. He put us out on the road in yellow sheets. We didn't have saris and dhotis. We were wearing sheets. And we had no luggage. We had some boxes. Somebody picked us up and took us to New York. And devotees in New York were very merciful. They let us collect for our bus ticket to Florida. And so that was fine. And after another year, Prabhupada asked for 50 devotees to come to India. So we were chosen from our temple. Again, Satsrup was the president, said, I'm sending you to India. We said, oh my God, how are we going to get to India now? We did hitchhike, I think, to New York. And again, they let us collect for India. So in 1972, we arrived in India, in Juhu, Bombay, and the deities were in a tent. And that night, there was no door to the tent. That night, all their jewelry had been stolen, their crowns, their flute. And the devotee who was guarding, he fell asleep. And so then it came prasadam time. And the men were living in Juhu. They were living in a hut. A hut which was the office, which was the prasad room, which was the kitchen, which was everything in one. The ladies were on top of the roof, and it was summer. So first day of prasad, I'm sitting there and in my plate, and there's all these huge rats running across the rafters. And I'm looking up and I'm thinking, I hope it doesn't fall in my plate. And he fell in somebody else's plate, and I was so happy. I know I shouldn't have been, but anyway, it was Juhu, Bombay. Drinking, and it took about 3 days before you would get sick, because our drinking water was in a clay pot, and you opened the top of it, and all of these bugs would fly out from it, mosquitoes. We would sick, but we were so happy because Prabhupada. We were following Prabhupada's order. We got a one-way ticket to India in 1972, And pretty much we never went back, except now we got stuck for COVID. But other than that, we've been in India since 72. And so then, but I did meet Srila Prabhupada before I came to India. It was in Gainesville, Florida, and at the airport. And I was following behind Prabhupada. And I felt, for the first time in my life, I felt like this is where I belong. I never belonged. When I was 10 years old, I was looking at all my classmates, and I was thinking, I'm not one of them. I don't know where I came from. Maybe came from another country. Maybe I came from another planet. But one thing I know is I'm not one of them. I'm not American. So, when I went to India, I felt a little better. So I was there. Let's see, what was I talking about? Yeah, we were at the airport with Srila Prabhupada. And I felt like I was following him. The first time I saw him, I said, I can do this the rest of my life. I will follow Srila Prabhupada the rest of my life. So, yes. And then he gave very famous talks in Gainesville, this remote corner of the world. So then after 2 weeks in Bombay, we were sent to Calcutta to be pujari in Radha Govinda's temple. And I saw Prabhupada many times there because he would go there on his way to Mayapur and back from Mayapur. They didn't go direct to Mayapur in those days. He would come and stay in Calcutta. Again, austere conditions, no electricity and no water, but at least I had a roof over my head. So I was happy about that. Ladies' ashram in Bombay with no roof. So yes, it was wonderful. So Srila Prabhupada, 1973, Prabhupada came to Calcutta Temple. And so Pradyumna saw me. He said, Prabhupada is going to translate Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he needs somebody to type for him. Because when I was in Boston, I was with the press, I was typing Bhagavad-Gita for Macmillan, Bhagavad-Gita as it is. And the first day I walked in the temple, they said, okay, you have to learn how to read Sanskrit. Here's the Isha Upanishad. There you go, learn it, and you have to transliterate. So now Pradyumna told me, okay, you have to learn to read Bengali. We're leaving tomorrow. I said, no problem, because impossible is a word in Foolish Dictionary, right? So, I was off to Mayapur with Srila Prabhupada the next day. And again, austere conditions. We were living in the Lotus building, which was not Lotus. It was under construction. There were bathrooms, but there were no pipes. So we had to go out in the fields and wherever we could. And the ladies' ashram, again, was not the best. We had no door to our room, and we had to go through the next room to get out the door. But the problem was the next room had no floor, and we were up on the first floor. So we had to walk on a plank to get out the door from the ladies' ashram. Anyway, but we were so happy to be in Mayapur with Srila Prabhupada. We didn't care. It was an adventure. There was no austerity for us, actually. Everything was a big adventure. And so one day I was sitting and I was typing Chaitanya Charitamrita. I had the earphones on, and I had this big book. I was on the floor, and there was maybe there was no desks or anything. It was like a trunk or something that I had my stuff on. And we had this really old typewriter, a manual typewriter, which probably none of you have ever seen. That you have to smash it every time it comes to the end, return. So I was typing on that. I had the headphones on, had this huge Chaitanya Charitamrita open. So I would hear Prabhupada speak the Bengali, I would read it, and I would transliterate it into English. So Prabhupada was walking up and down the veranda, and he looked there was no window, it was a hole in the wall. He looked in my hole in the wall, and he said, so, you know Bengali? I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. Although I didn't know any Bengali, I just learned to read. But he'd come to my room. So I came to his room, And he said, you know Bengali? Yes, Srila Prabhupada. I said, okay, so you learn how to type in Bengali typewriter. So one brahmachari then he said, and we will do many books together. I thought, oh, great, I'm going to travel with Prabhupada. But it never happened because all the pujaris in Calcutta got afraid of the new president and they all left the temple. So I had to go back and be the head pujari in Calcutta. Yeah, there was one temple president. Everyone was afraid of him. He had a reputation. So they ran away and I became the head pujari. But anyway, what Prabhupada said in 1973 came true 30 years later. I wrote many books with Srila Prabhupada, like maybe 16 books now. Srimad Bhagavatam at a glance, Bhagavad-Gita at a glance. So what the pure devotee says must come true. He said that, and it came true. That was in Mayapur. And then one Bengali brahmachari was teaching me to type in Bengali. And so I said to him, look, you just remember where the keys are and don't look at the typewriter, just look at the paper and see and type like that. He said, oh, now I understand what Prabhupada told me. He said, you teach her and you learn from her also. I was teaching him touch typing in Bengali. But anyway, it was quite wonderful. And I forgot, actually in 1972, I came to Vrindavan. Another thing Prabhupada said came true. He said about me in Vrindavan. And I was here for Nectar of Devotion classes, half of them. And austere conditions again. It was, we were living in Keshigot, which was not a palace at that time. It was really run down. The bathroom was so bad that the shower, Vishaka and I just jumped in the Jamuna because the walls were slimy and it was pretty bad, and all these cobwebs and the lights would go out and you couldn't figure out where anything was. So we just jumped in the Jamuna from our bath from Mangalarti because it was very deep then. It was very deep. You could just jump in and not touch the bottom at Keshigot. Very deep in 1972. The only problem was you might hit one of those huge turtles. That was the danger of jumping in the Jamuna in 1972. It was very clean and nice. We were... so Nectar of Devotion, I was just hearing one class today, and there had been some kind of fight, and they attacked our Keshigot, and Malati saved us by coming out with prasad and distributing prasad to the mob, she and Saraswati. But they wanted to, come in and beat us up and everything. There was some fight. So in that lecture I was listening today from Nectar of Devotion, Vrindavan, Prabhupada was telling the Brijbasis, these foreigners are coming here. They're sincere. They're trying to learn Krishna Bhakti. So you should welcome them and not come and fight and see the fault. So that was a lot of his Nectar of Devotion was trying to convince the Brijbasis that we were Vaishnavas. Like Rupa Goswami says, all human beings are eligible to perform devotional service. So that was his message. So one time we were sitting, Prabhupada would give darshan in the evening after the class in his rooms, Radha Damodar temple. And that was where the classes were, Radha Damodar. And we would walk there from Keshigot and back. And we would have Harinam every day down here to Raman Reti, but nothing was there, at that time. Anyway, so one time Prabhupada was sitting on his asan, and there were some bananas at his feet, and monkey ran in, grabbed the bananas, and ran out. So Prabhupada said, see how intelligent the monkey is. None of you would dare to do that. So he said, but monkey is intelligent for eating. Don't be intelligent for eating. Don't be intelligent. Another time, Achyutananda was joking with Prabhupada, because Prabhupada said, well, if you commit offense in Vrindavan, then you come back as a hog, a dog, or a monkey. So, that time, even now, I think there's a lot of sewage in the gutters, and the hogs would go in there and eat the sewage. I think even now it's like that. I'm not sure. And then it was very much a lot of hogs. So Chitananda joked with Prabhupada. He was saying, yes, this life, they're making it dirty, and next life they will come and clean it up as hogs. And so, he was joking sometimes. Prabhupada. So one night, Prabhupada singled me out. He said that my sister tells me you speak Srimad Bhagavatam very nicely. I was completely puzzled because I never spoke Srimad Bhagavatam and what to speak of nicely. But what she meant was it was Janmashtami day, and we had to read Krishna book from morning till night. My turn came and I was reading in English, and Prabhupada's sister was sitting in front of me, and she didn't know English, only Bengali. And I was being very dramatic. Oh, Krishna left the gopis, and she was crying. She was crying, and she didn't, how she understood, I don't know. And she told Prabhupada, she speaks Bhagavatam very nicely because I was reading Krishna book. But 30 years later, I started teaching Bhagavatam in VIH. Because Prabhupada said that if you read one chapter or sing one chapter of Bhagavatam every day for 1 year, you will become a scholar. I did that. I was singing the Sanskrit of Bhagavatam, a chapter every day for 1 or 2 years. Then I started teaching Bhagavatam. It works. You can try it. I just did the Sanskrit. You can do Sanskrit or English as you like. And then 30 years later, he said what he said came true. He started. So those were the two. One was in Vrindavan. One was in Mayapur. Two things Prabhupada said that came true in my life 30 years later. So I was Pujari in Calcutta, and Prabhupada would come, and almost every class he gave in Calcutta, he would praise the deity worship. Why? We had something very, very special there. I had a man donating 50 garlands a day for Jagannatha and Radha Govinda. I would change the flowers 5 times a day on those deities. And there was an open window in the back. Every day, a bumblebee or two would come to Radha Govinda's altar, circumambulate the deities, and sit on the lotus. We had lotus flowers also, 144 lotus flowers every day, big ones like your face. And these bees were coming in and sitting, bumblebees, on Radha Govinda's side. On Jagannath's side, small bees would come and sit on the garlands the whole day. So Prabhupada said, when the bees are coming to the deities, then Krishna is pleased with the worship. So we had the bees, we had bats, we had all kinds of things coming to the deities in Calcutta. Cockroaches, rats, mice. So yes, it was, but I didn't feel like I was in Calcutta. I felt like I was with Krishna. Because I had 20 hours deity worship, 4 hours sleep. So 20 hours with the deities. Because we didn't have a chokidar. I was the chokidar. I had to protect the deities. There was no protection there. And we had one crazy lady was coming and offering things and throwing them like a bar of soap at the deities. One time I dragged her down the stairs. Anyway, what can you do? I had to be there. I had to be there with the deities the whole day to protect them. And so so Prabhupada, sometimes he would chastise us because we had no electricity, so we had these big, huge ghee lamps burning whole day. And one time he said, "Why is the ghee lamp dirty? Who has done this?" Oof. So then he calls us up, and you just want to hide somewhere, go inside the floor, but no, you have to take it, chastisement. But he also praised us a lot. Almost every class he would praise the deity worship. In one class he said, this deity worship is being conducted by Srimati Radharani. So many classes. And it was austere. Prabhupada, in one class he said, thank you for preaching in Calcutta. He says, I cannot stay here, because his wife was living there. Oh, he said, I cannot stay. So thank you for preaching here. He says, I know you don't even get milk to drink. In those days, there was no ghee, no milk. It was all contaminated, all something in it. We couldn't get any milk or ghee. But our president, Gargamuni, he got ghee from Australia. So after that, we had our ghee, but still no milk. Anyway, so one time Prabhupada was giving Bhagavad-Gita class in Calcutta, and it was 9th chapter, verse 11. Avajananti mamudha manashim tanumashitam prambhavam vajananto mama bhuta mahesham. So the men had the book. The ladies didn't have a book. So when it came turn for the ladies to give the verse, I said it from memory. And Prabhupada looked at me like, wow, he was so happy. He really wanted us to learn these verses. Really wanted us. So another time in Calcutta, it was Shringararti. Prabhupada came. He sat on the Vyasa-san surrounded by sannyasis, maybe 10 of them. And he said, who has dressed the deities today? And he called my husband and I up. I used to dress Krishna and my husband used to dress Radharani. And it was so funny. My husband was worried. He thought, I will get all the best things for Krishna. I said, no, Radharani has to be better than Krishna. And that's what they taught us. Radharani has to attract Krishna. She has to be better. And so Prabhupada came for Darshanarti. He called us up to the Vyasa-san. And he said, thank you for dressing the deities so nicely, for serving the deities. So then after that, we offered our obeisances. And I remember I had some sari. It was full of holes because our temple president was in sannyasi. He didn't realize we needed, clothes. So, in fact, I didn't have any shoes. Someone stole my shoes. He said, you don't go out. You just stay with the deities. You don't need shoes. Okay. So, and it was like that. So I was trying to hide the holes when I was offering obeisances to Prabhupada. But then Prabhupada saw it because after 4 days later, one of our life members, I think his name was Bajoria, and he came to me and says, I'm taking you to all the sari shops of Calcutta. I said, really? Why? He said, no, I'm taking you. And so from that day, I never had problem for saris. I think Prabhupada, he understood. But another very wonderful thing happened when we were offering obeisances to Prabhupada. A sannyasi afterwards came to us and said, did you hear what Prabhupada said when you were offering obeisances? And we said, no. Prabhupada said, be blessed. Be blessed. I said, wow, we got the blessings. Yay. Back to Godhead. We're going back to Godhead. But, you can't retire at the age of 25 or 27. No. So the next day, I thought, okay. I got the blessings yesterday, but I got to earn the blessings again today. Every day it's a new day, and we have to keep trying to earn the blessings of the spiritual master. And so then I was on a morning walk in Bombay, Juhu Beach. I was late. I was running to catch up, running. And I caught up, and as soon as I offered obeisances, Prabhupada stopped the whole morning walk, turned to me, said, Hare Krishna. I thought, wow, who am I? I'm just some insignificant one of thousands. But he has time to acknowledge my presence. He had the time for everyone. He had time for us. So I was very happy about that. And I said, oh. But then another thing happened during the morning walk. He was walking so fast. Now, I was 20-something and he was 70-something. So I was trying to figure out, how does he walk so fast? I couldn't figure it out. It was something inconceivable. Prabhupada was like that when he was giving class. I would look at him, and to me, he was not really in this world. He was like watching a movie, he seemed like, okay, he's here in some way, and he's not here also in some way. I could never figure him out. I was trying to figure out, but never could. Then I realized, no, only by devotion you can really understand the spiritual master, not by your intelligence, by your cleverness. You cannot understand. And so, yes, that was my experiences with Srila Prabhupada. That's what I remember now. But I do have one experience I'd like to share with you after Prabhupada left. How he's here even now for us. That happened to me in 1994. When I first came to Vrindavan, 1993, I didn't know what service I'm going to do because 7 years I was pujari, 7 years I was book distributor, and 7 years I had a child. I was taking care of my child. And at the age of 7, he went to Gurukul. I said, okay, I was praying, what's my service? What should I do now? I didn't know. So I thought, okay, until I find out, I'm just going to read Prabhupada's books because that's what I like to do. And in fact, like when I was in Calcutta, we didn't get any books in India. Nothing was coming here. So in 1974, they started the Mayapur festival. And I would see devotees come in with a book under their arm, and I would beg for the book. I got the whole set of Chaitanya Charitamrita and Srimad Bhagavatam that way. From devotees coming from Mayapur, I just beg for the books. So then, so now what's happening? Not working? So what's happening? Yeah, okay, 1994. I came to Vrindavan, and so Srila Prabhupada was there in the Samadhi and in his rooms. That's where Srila Prabhupada is. So I was praying, I was reading, and then I decided to do japa reform. I was trying to chant very nicely. So after chanting japa for about 3 months, I got the inspiration that, now I'm reading Prabhupada's books so much. By the time I came to Vrindavan, I had read the books 10 times already. I said, now I should share what I know. I should teach. That was my inspiration. But I wasn't sure, I wanted a confirmation. So I went to the astrologer. He said, yes, you should teach. Yes, you should. You're good in research, teaching. Yes, you should do it. The astrologer confirmed, but that's not enough to see astrology. You want some spiritual guidance. I gave a few talks and devotees liked it a lot. So then I was praying. I went into Prabhupada's Samadhi and I was praying to Prabhupada. There was a lecture going on in the Samadhi. We used to have lectures of Prabhupada going in the Samadhi. So as soon as I walked in, Prabhupada was saying on the lecture that you think the deity is made of stone? And I looked up at Prabhupada. I said, no, you're here. I believe it. He said, you think the Goswamis were worshipping stone? I said, no, Prabhupada, you're here. I believe you're here. So then I thought, okay, but I want some more personal direction. So I thought, okay, let me go to Prabhupada's rooms, in his room over backside. And I said, maybe the letter on his desk will say something. And sure enough, I got the letter, and the letter said, you are one of my senior disciples. I'm counting on you, that you have learned the art of Krishna consciousness. So you should teach it purely for the benefit of others. I said, okay, I'm going to teach. Now, there was a problem with that because in 1994, the ladies couldn't speak in the temple. Ladies, there was no Gita class. And VIH was also for men. The Bhakti Shastri was only for men, no ladies. So I said, okay, where am I going to teach? So I just started in my room, which was outside one life member's house. And after a few weeks, the chokidar said, no, you can't have people coming here. This is a private house. So I said, okay. So then I went up to the roof of the Krishna Balaram guest house, and I started teaching up there. Few people came. And after a year like that, I got a place behind MBT, so for 2 years I was teaching out back there, and after 3 years of teaching on my own, the VIH opened up for women Bhakti Shastri, and asked me to teach. So what I learned from that is you can't count on facility. You have to make the facility. If there's no facility, it's not a problem. You just make it. And I made the facility. I just do it. That was what we knew in the early days. We had no facility. We had no money. We had nothing. We were just on the streets. But if you just take one step to Krishna, Krishna takes 10 steps to you. And so I just knew, okay, I got this order from Prabhupada. Somehow I have to do it. Somehow. So then after 3 years of teaching on my own, then I taught 1 year in Bhakti Shastri. After 1 year, I went traveling in Europe teaching. And then now, last 10 years, I've been traveling until COVID stopped me. 10 years all over the world, 8 months a year. So you can do it. If you have a desire to do some service for Krishna, if you have an order from your spiritual master, nothing can stop you. So that's what I learned in my Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada is still here for us. He will help you. You can go pray to him in the samadhi in his room. And he's there for us. He's there to help us. So I'll stop here, and Devi Shakti would like to speak. Hare Krishna.
Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutle Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavari Paschatya Deshatarine. I wanted to concentrate on the most intimate times that we had with Srila Prabhupada here in Vrindavan. It was before the temple was constructed, 1974. Srila Prabhupada had been traveling nonstop all over the world, from America to Europe, then to Australia, then back to America, then finally he came back to India in July of 1974. And in all of his travels, he was inviting all the devotees to come for what he thought was going to be the grand opening of this temple on Janmashtami, August 11th of 1974. Now, the couple who donated this land, they had made a stipulation at the time of the donation in 1972 that we will give you this land and we want you to build the temple within 1 year, 1973. But because of the non-accessibility of steel and particularly cement, it wasn't possible. So Prabhupada asked them for an extra year And they relented. They said, all right. So 1974, you had the temple ready. So there was a pressure on Srila Prabhupada. And because of that pressure, he was pressing the devotees like anything to get the temple built. So we arrived also in July of 1974. Guru Das had invited us to come and help with the temple, with the building of the temple after it was opened. And we were helping Jamuna. There were no facilities, there were no buildings on the land. There was no guest house. The guest house was just a big hole in the ground. At the front of the temple, there was nothing, of course, no samadhi, and there were just go-downs of cement. And there was one generator. With one generator, the entire temple was built. Little generator to run the cement mixer. That's all we had. All of the woodwork was done by hand tools. There were no drills in those days. There was no electricity. So everything was done by hand. So we had nowhere to stay, the ladies. And Prabhupada had given permission. There were 3 huts for the men along the wall. And there was a kitchen. And we got to stay in Srila Prabhupada's house. Because in Srila Prabhupada's house, all of their lordships were also living in Prabhupada's big room. Krishna Balaram, Radhasham Sundar, Lalita Vishaka, Srila Prabhupada, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and Gaur-Nitai. They all lived in Prabhupada's big room. So we lived with them. And there was no water. We had no running water here at all. We had a well, and you'd have to draw the water up from the well, and you'd take the water out of the bucket, and if you wanted to drink the water, of course, glasses you can't see in this. One time, somehow or other, I got a glass, a real glass, and as I was picking the water up to drink it, the light shone through the glass, and there were bugs swimming all around in the water. But that was all we had, so that was how we had to live. And any water we had to draw from the well, and no bathrooms. So it was very austere here, but because it was Vrindavan, and because we were all working very, very hard to build this temple, it didn't even matter. So finally, Prabhupada was going to arrive. He arrived July 25th in Delhi. He stayed for a few days, and he came here on August 4th. And we had gotten Prabhupada's house all ready for him. We moved the deities into his little room where he took prasadam. And still we had nowhere to stay. There were like 7 of us. There was Jamuna and Palika and Dinatarine and Rukmini, myself. And there was Prabhupada's sister. She had come because she had come for the grand opening. And we still had nowhere to stay. So we continued to stay with their lordships in that little room. Secretly, Prabhupada didn't know that we were staying there, right in his house when he arrived. And when Prabhupada entered the gate, Prabhupada in 1972 had sent his main artists. That was Lochan Das, who makes all the Prabhupada deities. And he had a team, Bharadraj, who was our top artist in the printing press, and Adi Dev. They were all sent to Bengal to learn how to make the diorama dolls, like you see at Durga Puja time. You know, those beautiful dolls they're only made out of straw, some wood, some straw, and then clay on top, and then painted beautifully. So they learned that art in Bengal, and then Bharadraj had to come here to oversee the carving of the deities. So all the artists came here, and Prabhupada had wanted for this temple Astasakis. But he told Jamuna that after they had already designed the altar. So Jamuna had designed the altar for only Lalita and Vishaka. So in order to accommodate that, the artists, they made 6 magnificent gopi dolls that were just as beautiful as deities. So they wanted to surprise Prabhupada. And when Prabhupada came in the gate that morning, thinking that the temple was going to be opened in just a few days, in a week, the first thing he did was he came into his room, and we were all there to welcome him, because that was Prabhupada's rooms were the only buildings in the whole property. So we were all in there to welcome Srila Prabhupada. And when Prabhupada saw those beautiful dolls in his main room, tears came to his eyes. They were so beautiful. And then we were all in the kitchen preparing Prabhupada's breakfast. There were like 6 of us in there. Again, Jamuna, Palika, all the girls who lived here. We were all there getting Prabhupada's breakfast ready in the kitchen. Now, not Prabhupada's kitchen that's here now. That didn't exist. Prabhupada's bedroom was his kitchen, and then Prabhupada's closet, I don't know if any of you have ever seen his closet, that was Prabhupada's washroom. So in order for Prabhupada to go to the washroom, he would always have to come through the kitchen. So we were there preparing the breakfast for Prabhupada, and Prabhupada had just seen those dolls, and he came in to go to his washroom, and the tears were in his eyes from seeing the dolls. And he saw all of us on the floor. Everything was done on the floor, frantically making his breakfast. And he waved his arm over us all. And he said to us, "You are all personification of the dolls." And we were all just struck. It was as if there was some fairy dust that came over us, that he had blessed us in that way. Prabhupada was so happy. So when Prabhupada first arrived on that day, he was very happy. Then he went to his washroom. He came out to see the progress of the temple, because Gurudas had been writing to him the whole time Prabhupada was traveling, that whole year, because Prabhupada was saying to him, "It must be ready. I want no excuses." You can read the letters. They were very strong. And Gurudas, who was our temple president, he was the only person writing to Prabhupada. And Gurudas was so worried about displeasing Prabhupada. So he kept assuring Prabhupada that yes, the temple will be ready. Everything is going to be ready when you come, because he didn't want to disappoint Prabhupada. But the temple nothing was ready. Nothing. Just their lordships were ready. That was all. There were no doors on the altars. The altars were there. There was no floor in the temple. There was Prabhupada's Vyasa sun, unpainted. It had just come like that. So there were 3 teams here. 3 teams meant Prabhupada assigned Jamuna and Gurudas to prepare everything for the deities, all the pujari work and the kitchen. And then the other team was Saurabh and Gunarnava. They were in charge of all of the construction. And the other team was Gurudas and his Namahata party in Japan. And they will come every now and then to bring money to make sure that the construction was going on. But there were some things missing, because April of that year, Tamal Krishna Maharaj had left as the GBC to go preach with Vishnujan Swami in America. So there was no GBC to oversee all of India. Prabhupada sent Karandar here, but Karandar within 2 months resigned. It was too difficult for him. So the only person that Prabhupada was getting any information from was Guru Das. And Prabhupada expected that the temple would be ready for the grand opening in a week. So when Prabhupada came out of his house, we were all there because by that time, about 300 devotees had arrived for the grand opening, because as Prabhupada was traveling, he was inviting everyone for the grand opening and writing letters that you should come, I'll see you in Vrindavan, like that. So then Prabhupada, he saw the temple, and the temple was just raw bricks. Nothing was ready. The carpenters were still in the courtyard making the doors. And Prabhupada, he just said, "What is this? There's no temple. How can we open this temple?" And the more he saw, the more disappointed and angry he became. He went into the temple and saw the raw condition. He saw there were no doors on the altar. And the devotees who came, it was as if they had just seen it for the first time also, that there's no way we can open the temple now, it's impossible. But everyone thought, no matter what, we're going to get this temple open. But Prabhupada, being very proud, he said, we can't open this temple. And then Harikesh had come. He had been sent to oversee Guru Kripa in Japan. He came for the grand opening. And Harikesh, he suggested, well, Srila Prabhupada, maybe we can just install the deities on Janmashtami. And Prabhupada didn't accept that. No, he said, you can't invite deities into an unfinished temple. It's not possible. So every moment, Prabhupada became more and more angry, furious, disappointed. It wasn't an anger in the mode of passion. It was absolute, such disappointment that he wasn't properly informed. And he thought, I've invited people from all over the world. Now what am I going to tell them all? So then Saurabh spoke up. He said, Prabhupada, we haven't invited anyone here in India because everyone knows that the temple isn't ready. And then Prabhupada became a little bit happier. He said, oh, really? No one here is expecting that the temple would open? No, Prabhupada. Everyone knows the temple can't open now. So then Prabhupada came back into his room, and everyone was so frightened of Prabhupada's mood. And he started to chastise them like anything. Why wasn't I told? When can we open the temple? How long will it take? And Saurabh explained that we can't get the cement. That's what the holdup is. Because everything was government controlled at that time. And the government was interested in building industries. That it was purely, the emergency hadn't started yet, but it was a purely secular government at that time. There were big banners, workers' worship, because they were pro-communist at that time. So we couldn't get cement to finish the temple. And Saurabh said, if we can get cement, we can finish the temple in 3 months. Otherwise, it'll take us at least 7 or 8 months. So then Prabhupada calculated, all right, let's have it at the same time that all the devotees come for the Mayapur festival. We can have it on Ram Nomi, which is 8 months away. Prabhupada gave them an extra 1 month. And then Prabhupada personally began to arrange for all of the cement. Guru Das told a story that when he was bringing Prabhupada from Vrindavan for the first time, it was 1971, it was so exciting for him. He was taking the pure devotee to the holy dham of Vrindavan. He would get so much enlightenment. So as they're approaching Vrindavan, as they get towards Chata side, Prabhupada points out of the window and he says, cement. And there was a big water tower. He said, we need a tank like that. So Prabhupada the whole time was just thinking of how he could develop this temple. So within 2 weeks, due to the tension of what had happened, Janmashtami came. It was 1 week, actually. And during that time, because Pishima was here, now Pishima is Prabhupada's sister. They grew up together. They learned all of their worship together. Everything, their whole life was together until Prabhupada left Calcutta. And she loved Srila Prabhupada like her very life. So she came here and she wanted to cook for Prabhupada. But all of the ladies had had experience of trying to cook with her in Calcutta and in other temples. None of them wanted to cook with her. So myself being the newest lady here, girl, they said, you can be Pishima's assistant. So they made me into Pishima's assistant, and as a result of that, I got to be in Prabhupada's house all day and night with her, cooking for 3 meals. So from morning until night, we got to be inside and see Srila Prabhupada. And also cleaning Prabhupada's house. And whenever Pishima would want to talk to Srila Prabhupada, she would never go alone. She would always take someone with her. That meant she would take me with her. So she and Prabhupada would sit and talk together, and I would sit with them. I couldn't understand what they were saying because I didn't know any Bengali at the time. And they would talk, and then we would go into the kitchen, and I would have to help her with everything, but we couldn't communicate. Prabhupada would tell her what he wanted to eat, and everything had to be done just by sign language. So she taught me how to cook just by watching her all day and night. And then for herself also, she would cook for Prabhupada, and then I would bring the plate in for Prabhupada, and then I would bring the plate out when he was finished, and then she would sit down and I would serve Pishima prasadam from Prabhupada's plate. One day, I was serving her, and being very immature in my devotional service, I put a little bit too much on her plate, a little bit more than what she wanted. And she got so disturbed by that. And just as I had done that, Prabhupada walked in the room, and he looked at me very sternly, because it's not proper etiquette. When you serve prasadam, you have to just give a little bit what the person wants. So I learned from that. And little things I was learning from being with Pishima and with Prabhupada at that time. All these little things. We wouldn't offer anything before we brought it into Prabhupada. Everything would be hot. Pishima would cook, put it right on the plate, bring the plate right into Srila Prabhupada, and that was our system. And one day, Brahmananda, who was the secretary, he came to get Prabhupada's plate. And we were there in the kitchen getting the plate ready, and he picks up the plate, and he says to me, "Is it offered?" And I look at Pishima, and she looks at me, and she goes, "Jai Nrsingadev." It's offered. Then he takes it. Then after cooking for Pishima, feeding Pishima, the remnants, all the servants had to be fed. So we would make something for the servants as well. And Prabhupada would be very attentive. Anything that went on in his house, Prabhupada noticed. Except that he didn't notice that we were still staying in his room secretly with the deities. That he didn't notice. We were so secret, we would get out long before, while he was still translating, get out, go to Mangalarti, and then not be there all day, and then sneak in at night after Prabhupada had his milk. So he never knew that we were there. So Janmashtami was coming. And because I had just come from America, I had a little bit of money. I had like 1,000 rupees. And because I had that money, everybody was treating me very nicely. They thought, well, you know. But I took that 1,000 rupees and I went down to Loy Bazaar and I spent all the money on gifts for Srila Prabhupada, for Janmashtami, for Vyasa Puja. All the money. And I bought with no sense of what I was buying, I bought trays and chutters and lotus, and I didn't know what I was buying, but all the most beautiful things that I saw. And I bought, Prabhupada was bathing out of a plastic bucket. I bought these beautiful brass buckets. You can see them in Prabhupada's house there. And polished them like gold. And Prabhupada loved those buckets for his bath. We would put them out in the sun. They would shine just like gold. And in the small one, we'd put hot water. In the big one, we'd put cold water. Bring it from the well. And then all these things, that night on Janmashtami, there wasn't going to be the opening, but Prabhupada sat with all the devotees because he would give his classes in the temple. Still, even though there was no floor, we would all sit there and Prabhupada would give the morning class and sometimes the evening class. Otherwise, he would have the devotees speak in the evening. So that night, we were reading Krishna book until after midnight. That was the practice. Wherever Prabhupada was, on Janmashtami, we would read Krishna book the whole night until the big artik. So while Prabhupada was there with the devotees, because I had access to Prabhupada's house, I went in to Prabhupada's room and I put all these gifts on Prabhupada's desk. And I thought, when he comes back, he'll have all the gifts there. And I wrote him a poem because Prabhupada, he would give his morning talk in his room. And he was speaking because it was Chaturmasya at that time. He was reading from the section of the Bhagavatam about how Narada Muni became a devotee. And he was speaking about, just by the association of the Bhaktivedantas, Narada Muni, by taking their remnants and serving them, in one lifetime, he was able to get his spiritual body. So I wrote a poem about that, put it all there. And when Prabhupada came back after midnight, the 3 windows that are there, because it was all construction site, it was all dirt. I went to peek in the window to see if Prabhupada enjoyed the gifts. And when I looked in the window, I saw that Prabhupada had collapsed against his asan, the asan that's there now. Just collapsed as if he was unconscious. And I got so scared, I ran to Shuddhakirti and I said, Prabhupada's very sick. You have to go see what's wrong. He's collapsed on his asan. So Shuddhakirti went in and he saw him. And from that night, Prabhupada got high fever, 104, 105. No one knew what it was. And the next day, because of all those things that I had bought, it turned out that everything was perfectly what was needed to give Prabhupada a foot wash, abhishek of his feet. So just to satisfy all the devotees, although he had a high fever, he came and sat at his Vyasasan, and they used all that paraphernalia to wash Prabhupada's feet. But he wasn't well enough to stay for the whole program. He came back, and his fever just started to rage. He couldn't eat because Pishima would still cook for him, so I would still be there. We would still be in the house. And Prabhupada would have to be carried, one devotee under each arm, into his washroom. So we would see Prabhupada all throughout the day and see his condition in this fever. And the doctors were saying it's malaria. But Prabhupada took the medicine for 2 or 3 days. He said, don't send the doctors here anymore. He said then, confidentially, he said, this sickness is caused because 80% of my leaders are not following the principles. So then it became, the onus was on us then. Because of us, Prabhupada has become sick. So then, in order to bring the fever down, Prabhupada said that he wanted chandan made 3 times a day. So I would make chandan for Prabhupada. I had this special formula that I had devised, and he liked that chandan very much. So 3 times a day, he had me make the chandan for him. And even though Prabhupada couldn't cook, Pishima insisted cooking for him, because her philosophy was that if he sees the food, then his appetite might increase. So she would still make a full plate for Prabhupada 3 times a day, even though he wasn't able to eat more than a little bit of orange or grapes. That's all he could eat. But he would see the food. Sometimes he would taste it. And one day, she made for Prabhupada Jagannath Puri chana dal, the sweet chana dal that Jagannath eats. And Prabhupada had a disciple named Pranav. Pranav used to make all types of Ayurvedic medicines for Prabhupada. And he used to come in and tell Prabhupada's joke. He would tell Prabhupada jokes to cheer him up. So they were very funny jokes. Maybe I'll tell them someday. So maybe I'll tell one of them right now, because they were so funny. And Prabhupada would laugh at these jokes. He said there was a couple, very poor couple, and all they owned was a donkey. And because they took the donkey as their son, they brought the donkey to a school one day, and they asked the headmaster, the teacher, we want you to train our donkey, give him an education, and we'll give you 500 rupees. So the teacher said, yes, of course, you keep your donkey here, and I'll train him. So he kept the 500 rupees. And after 6 months, the husband and wife came back, and he sold the donkey, got some more money. And he had an enemy in the school, another school teacher. So the husband and wife came and said, we want our son back. So he said, yes, I have trained him so nicely that he's teaching now. He's in the other classroom. You can go get him. So they went to the other classroom, and there was the teacher teaching, and they took the rope and they put it around his neck, and they started to drag him out of the classroom, and Prabhupada was laughing. So that was Pranav. So he used to make these medicines. He would cut the munaka raisins in half and put all these spices in and then he would take chili peppers and roast them, and if the smoke came up, it meant that someone had put a nazar on Prabhupada. He would do all these things like that for Prabhupada, just to humor Prabhupada. Prabhupada didn't care about any of it, but so it so happened that Pranav was in the room when Prabhupada was brought his plate of prasadam, when Pishima made the chana dal. And Prabhupada, he said to Pranav, she makes these things, I don't eat them, I don't like them, I don't eat this chana dal. So Pranav got very angry, and he came into the kitchen. He was roaring at Pishima. None of us could do that. Pishima would do whatever she wanted to do. He said, You're making these things that Prabhupada doesn't even like. He doesn't eat them. You shouldn't make this chana dal. And Pishima became furious. She said, you don't understand a pure devotee. She said, he can eat rocks if he wants to. So they had a fight back and forth. And the next day she made the chana dal for Prabhupada. Nothing was going to stop her. So one day we were cooking and there were other devotees, all Indian women. The foreign wouldn't come, they wouldn't come to cook when Pishma was there. So Prabhavati was there from Imli, that's Pishima's god sister. And another Mataji named Vanamalini, that was Pranav's wife. So I was running around trying to serve these three Matajis, again, no language communication whatsoever. And Prabhupada comes in to go to his washroom, and he sees us there, the four of us there in the kitchen. And Pishima jokes with him. And Pishima says, you've got 3 cooks and 1 coolie. So Prabhupada laughed. So from that day, I was very proud to be known as Prabhupada's coolie. And so that went on until Prabhupada got better. Then Pishima took rest, and Palika wanted to cook for Prabhupada. So that era was over. And then soon after that, Prabhupada decided that he was going to go to Mayapur. But before he went to Mayapur, what's the time? 5:50. Okay, thank you. Before Prabhupada went to Mayapur, the temple wasn't even opened. We had the 1 acre of land that Gita Devi Sadaf had given. But Prabhupada was already looking for other land. And Prabhupada had such an intelligent plan, because in those days, there was absolutely nothing at the front of the temple. Nothing. There was a sign that said Ban Maharaj College. There were 2 buildings. And the rest of the land was completely empty. Somehow, for some unknown reason, right on the corner of Bhaktivedanta Swami Marg and the Parikrama, inside of Ban Maharaj's college, was a church. The church was about 1/4 the size of this room. It was never opened. It was always locked. The only way you knew it was a church was because there was a cross on top, but nobody ever went to it. So Prabhupada called Pranav, and he told Pranav, I want you to try to purchase this land because we have 2 problems. The first is sewage. When we open the temple, there's going to be sewage. And we have to have, there was no sewage system in India, in Vrindavan. There was no water system, nothing. But Prabhupada was thinking ahead, because we had the well, and sooner or later we were going to get water, in the taps. Sometime there was going to be water. And when there's water, that means there's sewage. So Prabhupada was thinking so far ahead. He said, we have to have some place to send our sewage, our drainage. And I want that drain water to grow crops, because we have to have cows in order to give the deities milk. So Prabhupada was thinking, we have to have cows, we have to have land for the cows, we have to have crops, we have to have a place for drainage. That drainage water can be the irrigation water for the crops, and then we can make fodder for the cows also. And one of the devotees objected that, how can you use drainage water for growing things for the deities and for the cows? It's contaminated. And Prabhupada said, no. In Bengal, during the rainy season, all the water is mixed together, and such good fertile water, and all the cabbages grow this big, So Prabhupada was thinking in terms of what they do in Bengal, that they use all types of water for irrigation. So before Prabhupada left, I'm missing some parts. I'll go backwards a little bit because we were all still staying secretly in the room right next to Prabhupada. Prabhupada, because there were only 3 rooms in the house, the servant's room, the room where there's now Prabhupada's prasadam room where the deities were, and his main room, and then the temporary kitchen. So this was going on for like 3 weeks. We were sneaking out, not coming back till late at night. And I started to get a fever from it because in the room was only 1 fan, and Jamuna and Dinatarne would sleep under that fan, and the rest of us, the windows had to be closed, the doors had to be closed. It was August, and I got a fever. And we would sleep at the feet of the deities because we had, no one could know that we were sleeping there. So we only had the deities in the room and us. So we would just sleep at the feet of the deities. And I would sleep at Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's feet because all the other deities were taken by the more senior devotees. And I would use his base as a pillow because we had nothing else. And it just so happened that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he was stationed right at one of those 3 windows you can see. And because Prabhupada was sick, they brought Prabhupada's bed outside onto his veranda. And he used to sleep there. And they would put a big mosquito net over Prabhupada's bed that hung down to the floor. And Shrudakirti would sleep under Prabhupada's bed, under the security of that mosquito net. And that way he could be there in case Prabhupada woke up and needed him in the middle of the night. Because one time Prabhupada, he was so weak, he tried to get up to go to his washroom, and he fell over. So Shrudakirti immediately woke up and picked him up and said, Prabhupada, I'm here to help you. Please, call me. Just tell me you want to get up. So as Prabhupada was getting better, one night, as I was sleeping there at the window, I woke up 1 o'clock in the morning, and from the window, of course the curtains were all drawn, but there was a little crack under the curtains. And because I was lying there, I saw as Prabhupada woke up. Of course, Prabhupada couldn't see me. And I saw Prabhupada's beautiful face. I mean, who gets to see Prabhupada when he first wakes up? So Prabhupada had gotten out of his bed, and Prabhupada had the most beautiful smile on his face. And he was looking up and smiling as he walked. It was so transcendental. Who amongst us, when we wake up, are we smiling? So that's how Srila Prabhupada woke up, with a smile on his face, looking up to Krishna. So then he came in. So then he would go in to his washroom, and when he was feeling better, he would go to his main room, and all night he would translate until morning walk time. So one morning, I got that fever, and during Prabhupada's morning walk, I snuck back into the room, went under the fan, and fell completely dead asleep on the table. We had a table there that Jamuna and Dinatarne slept on. So I thought, nobody's here, nobody knows what I'm doing. I'll go sleep on the table under the fan, and maybe my fever will go away. So I'm there sleeping, trying to, sleep before Prabhupada gets back. And suddenly, the room's all dark, the doors open up, and the room gets filled with sunlight. And I turn over, and it's Srila Prabhupada. and he sees me sleeping there. I offer my obeisances, and he says to me, "Where's the old lady?" His sister. I said, "Oh, I'll go get her, Prabhupada." I ran out, went to get Pishima. She came back. He wanted to tell her what he wanted to eat that day. And then later in the day, Srudakirti came to me. He said to me, "Prabhupada wanted to know why you were sleeping in his room." So I had to tell him. I said, "We've been sleeping there the whole time. We're all sleeping there, not just me. We're all there. We have nowhere to stay." So Srudakirti went and told Prabhupada that. And then Prabhupada arranged for us to stay at Seth Bishanchand's house. Seth Bishanchand was a retired ex-MP. This Agrasen Dharmshala that's there, that was all his property. And where we have our Kirtan Ashram, that was all his property. So he had us stay in one of his houses there. And I got to stay with Pishima. She would have me sleep at the foot of her bed, at her feet. And we would come back and forth together. And that way, we finally got a place to stay, all the ladies. So now Prabhupada, he was thinking to go to Mayapur, and he told Pranav to try to get that land. Prabhupada left around mid-September. He was here for about a month and a half. And in September, it's very beautiful in Mayapur. The breezes and the rainy season, very nice. So Prabhupada wanted to go there to recover. And Pranav, he found out about the land, and he had to give a report to Prabhupada. And it was like a top secret report. So Pishima, she had to go back to Calcutta because Prabhupada had left. So Pishima tells Gunarnava, she wanted me to go with her to Calcutta. So I didn't want to go to Calcutta, of course, but Pishima wanted me to take her there because I was her servant. So, all right, you have to go to Calcutta, and while you're in Calcutta, we want you to give this very important message, the whole portfolio, to Srila Prabhupada in Mayapur. So you have to go to Mayapur also. So we took the, what was it called? The Tufan Express, right? Tufan Express, third class, unreserved. Pishima, she taught me how to travel on an Indian train. She would religiously take her bath every morning before Mangalartik on the train. And she carried with her an Amul spray can, a tin can, full of murti. And she had a little bottle of mustard oil. And whenever she was hungry, she would pour the mustard oil into the Amul spray can, shake it up, and we would have our meal of murti. So that was how we made it to Calcutta. It turned out that Pradyumna and his wife Arundhati were on the same train as us. We happened to be on the same train. And it also turned out that the train broke down between Burdwan and Calcutta. It didn't move for 6 hours. And then finally, in the middle of the night, they told us, this train's not going to move. You have to find your own way to get to Calcutta. So everybody had to go out of the train. And Pishima, she had a hip problem. We had to carry Pishima, the three of us, across the tracks, jump into one of those local trains. Because it was nighttime, they were bringing all the fish into Calcutta. We sat with all the fish baskets. And we finally made it to Calcutta early in the morning. And I delivered Pishima to her home. And she insisted that all of us come to her house for prasadam. I'm sure you must have gone there numerous times, and she would feed us so much we couldn't even get out of the house to walk. So she insisted that we come to her house before we go on to Mayapur. And there were Srila Prabhupada's original little Radha Govinda deities that he gave to Pishima to worship when he left Calcutta. She would offer all of her food. I met her family. She fed us up to the gill. We couldn't even move afterwards. And then that afternoon, Shelda Station, is that what it's called? We got on the local train, reached Mayapur 9 o'clock at night in Navadvip. What do you do 9 o'clock? So somehow we made it to Mayapur in the middle of the night. No electricity, as Narayani was saying. And everything was, we made it there, but we couldn't see anything. They lit a candle. And then other pastimes happened. If there's time, I'll go on with Mayapur. Yes, there's time, okay. So Shrutakirti was there with Prabhupada. And we knew each other from Philadelphia. We knew each other from Vrindavan. And we had just arrived, Pradyumna, Arundhati, and myself. It was late at night. And Shrutakirti comes to me. He brought his candle. And he says to me, "You have to be very careful." I said, "Why?" He says, "Well, the GBC heard that you're here in Mayapur. And they're going to talk to Prabhupada. And they're going to ask Prabhupada to tell you to go back to America and collect. And Prabhupada's going to call you tomorrow and talk to you." This was the plan. He was telling me the secret plan. So he said, "You have to be ready." So I had to go see Prabhupada anyway to give him that portfolio about the land. It turned out that the land wasn't suitable. It only had salty water, so it couldn't grow crops. So there was nothing, it was just that report. But Prabhupada was anxious to receive it. So the next morning, I had all night to think what I was going to say when Prabhupada said this to me. 9 o'clock in the morning, Shrutakirti comes. He says, "Prabhupada wants to talk to you." So I go up to Prabhupada's room. I was with my husband. He had been in Mayapur. Prabhupada wanted the devotees to learn how to weave. I don't know if they're still doing that in Mayapur. Do they weave their own clothes there anymore? In those days, they used to weave. And I used to weave. So Bhavananda, he told my husband, "Well, your wife used to weave, so I want you to learn how to weave." So my husband made the first gamsha for Prabhupada, weaving. And Prabhupada said, "No, I don't want these devotees to weave. I want the Bengali devotees to weave." So we went up to see Srila Prabhupada. I gave him some sweets that I'd made. And on one side of the room, there were 6 sannyasis and GBC who happened to be there from Mayapur, from Calcutta, all the heavy sannyasis. And on the other side of the room was myself and my husband, and Prabhupada was sitting at his desk. So Prabhupada, he looks at me and he smiles, and he says to me, "They want you to go to America to collect for Mayapur and Vrindavan." And that was the last thing in the world I wanted to do. Prabhupada didn't say he wanted me to go. He said, "They want you to go." So I didn't want to say no to Srila Prabhupada. So I had a plan. I told Srila Prabhupada, I said, "If they want me to collect, then I should learn the way Giriraj collects, because the way I collect is very unintelligent. I just stand on a street corner and I get $1 from this person, $1 from that person. But Giriraj in Bombay, he goes to one person, he gets 1 lakh of rupees. So if I'm going to collect, let me learn how Giriraj collects. That was, was my plan, how to, it was the best I could think of without saying no. So Prabhupada understood immediately. He looked over at the sannyasis and the GBCs, and he said to them, force does not work. You cannot force. That is blink, blink, blink's way. That was the name of our GBC in New York. So Prabhupada understood exactly what was going on. So then he turned back to me unexpectedly, and he said to me, so what is your idea? My only idea was, Guru Das had invited us to come to Vrindavan, to open the temple, to serve in the Vrindavan temple. The only thing I was meditating on was I wanted to set up a beautiful reception here in Vrindavan with books, with preaching facility. It was the only thing I was thinking of. But I knew that it was September and the temple wasn't going to open until April. So if I told Prabhupada that now, then they would say, well, there's 8 months, she can still go and collect for those 8 months. So I had to think really fast in about half a second, what was I going to say to Prabhupada? What was my idea? So I opened up my heart to Prabhupada. I said, Srila Prabhupada, because I'm a book distributor. I said, Prabhupada, wherever I go, as soon as I open one of your books, a whole crowd of people come because your books are the most beautiful books in the whole world. So what I would like to do is, I would like to put your books in all the schools and libraries here in India, just like Satsvarup Maharaj is doing in America, because he had the library party in America going to the universities. So when Prabhupada heard that, he became brilliant. He became so like a million moons. And he put up his finger and he says, wherever she goes, she must distribute my books. And then he said, call Brahmananda. Brahmananda was the secretary. So they went to call Brahmananda, and Prabhupada said, we have just gotten our first shipment of books from Los Angeles, and they're all in the dock in Bombay. So I want you to go to Bombay immediately and start this program. I'm coming in 15 days, and I will train you. Then he said, I want you to put my books in all the schools, in all the libraries, in all the embassies. I want you to lecture in the colleges because you're foreigners. Everyone will come to hear you. So Prabhupada gave us at that time a lifetime of instructions. Then Brahmananda came, and he told Brahmananda, read the inventory of the books that have just arrived. Brahmananda started to read the inventory, Srimad Bhagavatam, all the books, the English books for the first time that had been printed in Dai Nippon. So when Prabhupada heard the inventory, then he said, let us see if she can clear the stock. You go there immediately. And within 1 hour, Prabhupada, we had just gotten there 9 o'clock at night. Within 1 hour, it was 10 o'clock in the morning, Prabhupada had a taxi to take us to Calcutta. From Calcutta, they arranged on the Janta Express, Calcutta, Bombay, 4-day trip. We were in Bombay. He sent a letter to Giriraj, you give them all facility to distribute the books, and I'm coming and I'll train them. So we were there in Bombay. And then in Bombay, Prabhupada started to train us how to distribute to the colleges and the libraries in India. because it's a different system here in India from the West. Here, every college has a Sanskrit, almost every college has a Sanskrit department. They know Hindu culture. They know Srimad Bhagavatam. And somehow or other, Srila Prabhupada knew every single detail about Bombay. We didn't know, because there was no Lilamrita at that time. We couldn't understand. Prabhupada would have us come to his room every evening, and he would tell us which colleges to go to. You go to Bombay University, Jai Hind University, Elphinstone University, all the different colleges and universities. And the next day we would go out, go to the universities, and come back in the evening, present the slips to Prabhupada, the receipts, who took which books. Then he would tell us where to go the next day. And this went on day after day. Prabhupada had unlimited resources of where we were supposed to go, and that's where we went every day. One time we went where our Chopati temple is. Just near there is the, what's it called? The Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan? Is that what it is? Yes, Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan. The Munshis. We know Mrs. Munshi from when Prabhupada tried to start a center in Jhansi. Her husband was the governor or something like that. So they had this big Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan there, just near our Chopati temple. And we went there. We met Mrs. Munshi. And she asked us, would Prabhupada like to buy her printing press? And she also offered that we could put articles in her Bharatiya journal. So we reported that back to Prabhupada that night. And Prabhupada said, see, they couldn't distribute their books. That's why they wanted to sell their press. But Prabhupada was doing all the printing in Japan, so he didn't need the press. But we put a very nice article called Spiritual Communism in their journal. So one day, we were told by Prabhupada to go to, it was a small college. It was called Elphinstone College in Bombay. You get off at the Elphinstone stop on the local train. It's just right near the train stop. And he taught us that what you do is you first go to the head of the Sanskrit department and you show him the books, and he will order these books. And then you take that order and you go to each of the departments, and each of the departments will make their own order also. So we did that in all of the places, and it worked, because Prabhupada, everything Prabhupada says is perfect. But the problem was, in Elphinstone College, there was no Sanskrit department. So we said, they said, I'm sorry, we don't have a Sanskrit department. I asked them, I said, well, can we meet the librarian? So we went to the librarian, and we showed her the books. It was the first time Prabhupada's Bhagavatams had come to India. First time there was a translation of the Srimad Bhagavatam. We had the whole, presentation. And she looks at these books, and she says, I'm sorry, but we already have these books in our library. I said, that's impossible. They've just come off of the dock. The first time they've ever come to India. She said, no, we have these books. I'll show you. So she took us into her library, and there was a wooden, they keep old books in these wooden Elmiras. She opened up this Elmira, and right there were Srila Prabhupada's original 3 Srimad Bhagavatam volumes. And then everything clicked. Then I understood. This is how Prabhupada knew where all these places were. He had gone to all these places and put his books in all of these colleges. And there were his books already. So I became so inspired by that Srila Prabhupada, he wrote the books, he edited the books, he printed the books, he distributed the books. Now there's another later when we compared notes, because in 76, Gargamuni started his library party. Satyanarayan and Vyasaki, they went to Kashmir and they found Prabhupada's books in the University of Kashmir. Prabhupada had gone there and put his books there. So that meant that Prabhupada had done everything all alone before he came to America and made disciples. That inspired me so much. I said to my husband, because we didn't have any temples in India at that time. There's nothing. So we were just doing the Bombay area. I said, you book our tickets. We're going to start traveling now, because that's what Prabhupada actually wanted us to do. He wanted us to go all over India. So we went back to Prabhupada and we started to travel after that. And we went first to Kurukshetra because it was a big all-India Sanskrit conference. And we set up the BBT display, and everyone, all the Sanskrit professors were so attracted. They gave us invitations all over India to come to their universities. So from Kurukshetra, we went to Rajasthan. From Rajasthan, we went to Gujarat. Everywhere we went. And finally, we made our way back to Bombay to report to Prabhupada. It was about a month later. And we had a whole stack of receipts, all the different colleges, all the different professors who had bought the books. And we went up to Prabhupada's roof that night, and we showed him all these receipts, and he was so happy. And he said, she is one of the best. So Prabhupada says these things just to push us on, to encourage us. So then we decided to go south, because it was January at that time. We went to the Hyderabad Book Fair, and we went all over Andhra, then we hit Orissa, then we came up to Calcutta, and we met Prabhupada in Calcutta. And it was just before 1975, the grand opening. So we got to stay in the Calcutta temple. And everyone was going, there was no accommodation in the Calcutta temple, as Narayani was saying. So everyone had to go on to Mayapur. But because I had cleaned Prabhupada's house here and in Bombay, it was just my natural inclination to clean Prabhupada's room in Calcutta. So I was cleaning his room in Calcutta, and Prabhupada had a bed there. He still has the bed there. And he had a frame with mosquito net over it. So I very carefully set up his mosquito net, because it was all hanging. It wasn't aesthetically correct. So I made it very neat and clean. And when Prabhupada came into his room, he said, "Who's fixed my mosquito net?" And it must have been Shruti. Yeah, Shruti Kirti said that I had done it. So I'm not telling you these things to puff myself up. This is the way Prabhupada prods us on. He said, "Oh, she's expert at everything." So then, because Prabhupada said that, Pishima, who was there cooking, she needed an assistant again. So Shruti Kirti asked Prabhupada, could I stay and help Pishima? So I got to stay at the Calcutta temple and help Pishima there, and go with Pishima. And see, Prabhupada, when he went from Calcutta to Mayapur, he would take a caravan of cars, like 5 cars. And one of the cars would have the women in it. We would be the last car, and Prabhupada would be the first car. Did you ever go in that caravan? Yeah. So there would be 4 cars of sannyasis and GBCs, and we were dragging in the back. So one of the sannyasis didn't like the way the driver was driving. So he decided he was going to drive. The sannyasi was Pancha Dravida Maharaj. But he's American. And in America, you drive on the right side of the road. In India, you drive on the left side of the road. So you're trained in a different way. So the caravan was going. The driver refused to sit in the car. So he was hanging onto the back of the hood of the diggy on the outside of the car as Pancha Dravida was driving. It was below his dignity to sit in the car, so they put him on the outside of the car. And that car was the fourth car right in front of us. So suddenly, the cars are driving, and a truck comes in the opposite direction. And Pancha Dravida, being American, he swerves to the right, not to the left, which would be the normal thing to do. He swerves to the right, and the lorry also swerves to the right. And they both swerve off of the road into a field. And we were stuck behind them because we saw what happened, that they're riding off into the field, this lorry and the car. So the whole, we got stuck. The whole caravan, where is everybody? Prabhupada had to stop. They had to come back, get Pancha Dravida, convince him that the driver had to drive. Finally, we made it to Mayapur. And in Mayapur, also, I got to help Pishima, stay with Pishima. And then it was time for the grand opening here. So grand opening, maybe someone can tell me when it's 6:30, because I'll just, is it almost time? 3 minutes? Okay. So Prabhupada was sending people here ahead of time to make sure the temple was going to be ready this time. He sent Bhavananda, who was a designer. Bhavananda designed the New York temple, the Los Angeles temple, Mayapur temple, the TOVP temple. He's a designer. So Prabhupada sent him to be the director of the grand opening ahead of time. And Shruti Kirti arranged that we also go. My husband and I also go, because then I could get Prabhupada's rooms ready. Because Prabhupada's rooms, still all the deities were there, all the sewing was going on. It was still the main hub of the temple until the temple opened. So we got here about 2 weeks before the temple opened. And we thought we had 2 weeks until Prabhupada would come. There was nowhere for anyone to stay. The guest house was still under construction, even 2 weeks before. We stayed in Loy Bazaar at the Basanti Dharmshala. And before Mangal Artik, we would walk here. And Mangal Artik was in Prabhupada's room, because the temple wasn't ready yet. So that morning, just after we arrived, that morning, Bhavananda, he stands up. There were about 30 devotees here to get ready for the grand opening. He says, I just got a telegram, and Prabhupada is arriving this evening. So we thought we had 13 days. We had 13 hours. Within 13 hours, I don't know how many of you know Bhavananda, for whatever he is. Prabhupada said he does the work of 10 men. So he had all of the deities carried out, 2 men carrying each deity. He had the entire temple, the inner temple, the altar cleaned. He had everything cleaned, everything taken out of Prabhupada's house. My job was to get the house all ready from back to forward. The house still wasn't ready. We had to still put the jollies on the grills on the doors, on the windows. It was just amazing. And when Prabhupada walked in that gate this time, in 1975, there was no front room in Prabhupada's house at that time. It was a veranda. I had just reached with my mop cloth the front door. Prabhupada comes in, opens up the door. Everything is ready for Prabhupada this time. The temple is ready. His house is ready. The guest house is ready. And this time, it was going to be a grand success. And that was the grand opening of the temple. Hare Krishna. Jai.